Good morning, everyone, and my name is Patrick. Welcome to the 2023 Asia Salary Guide webinar. Hope everyone are feeling well this morning. Before we get started, I'd like to just give our guests who are still making their way in an additional 2 minutes to get settled so that they can also tune in. Please bear with us. Thank you. Hello and good morning once again, and welcome to the 2023 Asia Salary Guide webinar. My name is Patrick. Thank you to all of you who are here, and special thanks to all our guest speakers for taking the time to share useful insights with our audience today. Just to reiterate once again, this session will go on for an hour and a half. Once again, my name is Patrick, and I am your host for today. A little bit about myself. I'm currently a senior manager at Hays Singapore, leading the sales, marketing, insurance, and life sciences teams. I've been with Hays since 2014, so some of you might have received calls and emails from me throughout these years. So if you were to hear from me after today's webinar, I assure you that it's not a scam call. Today, we will be discussing the findings from our latest salary guide that are specific to the employment market here in Singapore. Our aim is to help you navigate the ever-changing job market and provide insights into the trends that are prevalent in today's job economy. We will start off with a brief introduction to Hays Singapore, followed by a special insights from the 2023 Hays Asia Salary Guide by Kirsty Halston. And finally, the panel discussion will be moderated by my colleague Justin Thomas and joined by 4 guest speakers, Jeff Cheng, Sarah Lee, Weber Wijnea, and Martin Van Resmel. Many thanks to some of you who have submitted questions during the registration. There are limitations to what we can and cannot answer in our capacity. So for those that we can, we have included the answers throughout the session. Some questions such as salary structure in specific functions or industry can be found in the salary guide, so we will not be touching on that today. So before we get into the data, I would like to give everyone a quick introduction of who we are and what we do. As many of you would know by now, Hays is a global recruitment company operating across 33 countries. Here in Singapore, we have just over 100 permanent and 300 contract employees, respectively. They would recruit for professions across 13 sectors, and we offer services across permanent and contract recruitment, RPO, and Managed Service Program, also known as MSP. Across Asia, we are currently operating in 7 markets: Singapore, Malaysia, mainland China, Hong Kong, India, Japan, and our newly opened office, which is in Thailand. If you have any questions about our services, please feel free to contact our consultants anytime. Now, moving on, let me introduce our first speaker for today. Kirsty Howson is currently the Regional Director for Hays Singapore. She has been in the recruitment industry for 15 years, leading successful teams in New Zealand, Australia, China, and now Singapore. She has been leading the Singapore business for over 2 years and is very passionate about her job and also her people. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Kirsty to present you the 2023 Hays Asia Salary Guide findings. I would highly suggest for the audience to take some notes down, as what Kirsty would be sharing will not be found in our salary guide. Over to you, Kirsty.
Great. Thank you, Patrick, and a warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Hays have been operating in Singapore for the past 14 years, and our position in the market allows us to share valuable insights on the employment market from both a client and a candidate perspective. It has been a pretty interesting year after a very strong set of trading conditions in the 2021 post-COVID rebound. In 2022, we did see a slower staff growth than anticipated, with 45% of employers increasing their headcount, which was slightly behind the initial forecast. However, having said that, despite slowing market conditions, trends show that employers are still expanding, with 51% of employers anticipating new hires in 2023, and there's still plenty of opportunities out there for job seekers, which I'm sure many in our audience will be pleased to hear. We asked our survey respondents, particularly hiring managers in Singapore, if there were any difficulties in their hiring strategy, and 43% revealed that they are still struggling to find the right talent. Drilling down into these responses further revealed that a majority of these hiring managers came from 3 industries: technology, no surprises there, sales, and accountancy and finance. When we asked organisations what issues they faced with hiring besides mismatched expectations of compensation and salary, 40% of them revealed that candidates lack specialised skills deemed necessary for their role. So there very much is still a skill shortage here. Additionally, when we asked employees and job seekers about their prospects when looking out for opportunities, 59% of respondents disclosed that they were nervous that they would lose their job due to the current economic situation. The other side of that coin is that 59% of respondents further expressed a desire to actually leave their current job should the economic situation improve. The main factors motivating job seekers to begin searching were better salary packages, a desire to seek new challenges, and better benefits like health insurance and allowances. In today's job market, it's important to understand what job seekers are looking for exactly in terms of the salary expectations. So it's always a hot topic, obviously. According to our latest survey, here's what we found. When we asked respondents if they had received a pay rise from their employer in the past year, 69% of them revealed that they had. Now, potentially that is because during the COVID period, many salaries actually remained stagnant. 2%, however, did reveal that they received a pay cut instead. Of that 2% that received a pay cut, 19% of these people revealed that they were actually compensated through reduced working hours and or were put on a sabbatical. In the same survey, we asked respondents what their salary expectations were in the next 12 months. 84% of job seekers told us that they expect the salaries to increase, while 14% kept a more conservative outlook, expecting their salaries to remain the same. And of those job seekers expecting a salary change, 70% expect to receive an increment of greater than 3%. And the good news is that 84% of employers are actually looking able to accommodate these expectations in the coming year. So what does this all mean for employers and job seekers? When it comes to salary expectations, both parties need to prioritise open and transparent communication during the hiring process. Through understanding each other's needs, a mutually beneficial solution can be found, fostering a successful working relationship. It's also really important for employers to discuss and highlight the non-financial benefits of joining the organisation, obviously. There is no denying that the job market is constantly evolving, and with it, the skills required to succeed. So how can we bridge the gap between skills demand and supply? This is something that was called out in our previous surveys as well. According to our research, 98% of employees believe that upskilling is their personal responsibility and of high importance, with 68% even investing in upskilling outside of their working hours. We saw a huge amount of investment from people upskilling during the COVID years as well, during periods of being at home through online learning, and it looks as though that trend is continuing in the post-pandemic era. However, it's not always easy for employers to find the time and resources to upskill in 2023, maybe in comparison to 2020 or the early part of 2021. Our data shows that 59% of employees feel that they simply just don't have the time to spend on training, while 29% of employers don't offer training and upskilling opportunities within their organisation. As the world of work continues to evolve, the complexity of jobs will start to become more challenging, and we need to ensure that we have skilled talent to keep up with these trends. By offering opportunities for employees to upskill and grow, you can attract top talent and build a more skilled and resilient workforce. We'll just take a deep dive into the training opportunities that employers are looking to capitalise on, and then have a look at what employers are actually offering in return. So provided a choice of 8 different learning and training opportunities, 66% of employees in Singapore would prioritise management and leadership training, followed by 59% favouring soft skills training and 56% looking towards hard or technical skills training. But then looking at what employers are actually offering, interesting data shows that 55% of employers are offering hard and technical skills training, followed by 48% on soft skills training, and then 39% on digital skills. So what does this really mean for job seekers and hiring managers? It's clear that there is a disconnection between what employees want and what employers are offering. By prioritising the training and development that employees value most, employers can improve job satisfaction and, of course, retention. And for job seekers, it's important to communicate your career development goals and seek out employers who prioritise training and development. Together, we can obviously create a more motivated and engaged workforce. We now look at just turn to the next slide. The pandemic has brought about significant changes to the way that we work, with remote and flexible work arrangements becoming more mainstream. 49% of employees are still expecting hybrid or full flexible working arrangements to be a part of their workplace benefit. So if we look just then, what does the future of work really look like? The initial post-pandemic period, certainly in Singapore, saw many employees or employers offer either full flexibility or a 3-and-2 work from home hybrid, which in many ways was a continuation of the government mandated policy around work from home and work from the office. But what we've really seen over the past 12 months is an organisation shift towards either a 4-in-1 working pattern or a full-time return to the office, with 32% of employers actually shifting to either full-time in the office or a 4-in-1 working pattern. So there is a discrepancy in the expectations from the employers and employees in terms of flexibility in the workplace. It's still an incredibly important and motivating factor for job seekers. We speak to candidates, on the ground every day. And one of the first questions that we're asked when discussing, a new vacancy or opportunity with a candidate is what is the client's policy in regards to flexibility and work from home. So it's incredibly important, but it's finding the right balance then between, the needs of the business and also retaining and attracting the best talent for the organisation. With the prevalent challenges in hiring quality talent and an undercurrent of uncertainty, with employees entertaining the idea of a career change in the right conditions, it would benefit companies to consider the chief factors that drive employees to either leave or stay in their roles. According to our survey, and this is something that features each year, 78% of employees leave their jobs due to salary packages. We are still seeing considerable increments being offered in the market for candidates that change jobs. It is still a very competitive marketplace in terms of salaries. We're seeing a slight correction in some sectors, but overall, when an employee changes jobs, the expectation is still very much to receive an increase. 52% leave their jobs due to a lack of better workplace benefits. I think we mentioned earlier there, things like health insurance is incredibly important. A desire to seek new challenges was another significant factor at 47%, followed by a lack of career progression at 39%. And lastly, just under 20% of employees leave their jobs due to the absence of an engaged management or mentor. As employers, it's crucial to take note of these factors and ensure that we offer competitive compensation packages and benefits, provide opportunities for growth and development. There's been a call out there around training, learning and development, and establish a supportive work environment that promotes career progression and a positive working relationship. By doing so, we can attract and retain our top talents and contribute to build a sustainable future for our organisations. With workforce demographics seeing an increased proportion of younger millennial and Gen Z workers, general awareness on sustainability efforts has grown exponentially in recent years. This fact was represented clearly through our respondents, with 69% of employees revealing that their organisation's environmental policy matters to them, and this is in huge contrast to, what those statistics would have reflected, going back a few years. Furthermore, 49% believe that their company already complies with the Sustainable Development Goals aligned with climate change and consumption. This is a positive sign, indicating that many companies are making efforts to adopt sustainable practices for a greener, more environmentally friendly future. Additionally, 46% of respondents believe that the organisation does implement sustainability reporting, providing stakeholders a transparent look into the company's efforts to achieve sustainability goals through their business activities. So as you can see, while companies are certainly doing their part for the environment, there is room to bridge the gap here. Organisations will find that aligning their business practices with sustainability goals will help them resonate with the job seeker market that demands to see more of this from their employers. I think just on that note, I'd like to take a little time to share how environment, social and governance is important to Hays, our efforts to drive sustainable business and help combat climate change. We have made really strong progress since we first announced our commitment to net zero in February 2021. Hayes became a carbon neutral company with a science-based target initiative in February 2022. Our efforts has decreased total emissions of up to 62% versus when we first started in FY20. This reflects our progress on the initiatives linked to our science-based targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which include increasing the use of renewable energy, the use across our office footprints, reducing business travel considerably through better use of technology. And along with many of our offices have actually removed, things like single-use plastics. So it's been great to be, part of an organisation that has made some real progress in this area. The global green sustainable market size was valued at 10.3 billion in 2020, and this is projected to reach 74 billion by 2030. As more of our clients are investing in the organisation's commitments to ESG, we're certainly seeing an increased demand for the recruitment of sustainability subject matter experts, across a wide range of industries, and we very much see this sector and this hiring demand as something that's only increasing in Singapore and across the rest of Asia. So within our own team, we focus on recruiting roles in a few different sectors across ESG sustainability, primarily focusing on corporate sustainability, things like environmental engineering, consultancy, and then the banking and financial services sector as well. Now, looking at the rising trend for employers in Singapore to hire contract workers, our survey reveals that more and more organisations in Singapore are leaning towards the use of contract employees on a regular, ongoing basis. This trend is indicative of a growing need for flexibility and agility in the workforce, with both employers and employees recognising the benefits of a contracting arrangement. For ourselves internally, we have a contract recruitment team here in Singapore. Just to kind of illustrate that point, we've grown by 55% year on year in the first half of this calendar year, which naturally then reflects the demand that we're seeing in the market from our clients, and also a willingness from candidates to work in contract roles that, maybe going back 5-10 years was just certainly not as common. If we look at this just in a bit more detail in terms of the reasons employers hire contract staff, the primary reason is to meet peaks in demand, followed by ensuring flexibility of staff and cost. Covering maternity leave or sabbatical periods is also another very common reason organisations look to engage a contractor. Now, looking finally at ED&I and the current landscape, 22% of respondents said their organisation's ED&I policies were actually a reason, or one of the reasons for them staying with their current employer, whilst 11% of Singaporean job seekers revealed that they were open to exploring opportunities in organisations that actually have stronger commitments to ED&I. Although ED&I covers a wide range of dimensions related to diversity in the workplace and society, the most common example of ED&I practices in organisations that we're seeing are through the supporting of underrepresented groups. This includes things like providing mentorship or networking opportunities, offering employee resource groups for specific communities, and ensuring that all employees have access to equal opportunities for growth and development through transparent hiring recruitment practices. In terms of gender diversity, so 51% of respondents said the organisations had women in senior executive leadership roles. 67% said that although the organisations had equal representation of men and women across the organisation, there were very few women in management roles, and 33% of respondents actually said there were very few women in the organisations at all. So this obviously suggests that despite some progress being made, to close the gender gap, there is still a lot of work to do, and organisations would be very well placed to implement strong ED&I policies. So that concludes the data sharing from this year's survey report, and we hope that you've been able to take away some useful insights. Before we kick off our panel discussion, I will quickly share some headline recommendations for both employers and working professionals. Firstly, there is an increasing preference for work flexibility in pursuit of better work-life balance. However, as I mentioned at the end of 2020, we saw more employers begin to reverse or tailor back the hybrid and remote work practices that had been the norm during the pandemic years. While reasons such as productivity, business continuity, and the preservation of organisational culture, it's incredibly important. Enforcing very strict return to office policies could prove detrimental to employee engagement and talent attraction, along with retention. So it's just, again, like I said, finding the right balance between the business needs and then also attracting and retaining, the best talent. There is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to flexible work policies, but what could help is to pulse employees to discuss their preferences, analyse the feedback, and then ensure the business is leveraging, the use of technology to create more cohesive hybrid teams, and a seamless on-site, off-site transition, wherever needed. Secondly, employers should determine the skills and organisation needs and help employees prioritise them by communicating development strategies and setting up structured learning or mentoring programs. Sharing how you intend to deal with upcoming challenges, the opportunities you can offer, and embedding a sense of purpose will strengthen employee engagement and talent attraction. Focus on how you can enrich your employees' journey with the company by providing learning and upskilling opportunities that not only benefit them now, but which will keep them competitive as their job scope expands and their careers progress. And lastly, turning aspirational values into tangible action and make it part of the organisation's mandate. On top of compensation that we see feature in our survey report, year on year, one of the most important factors in employee retention that we're seeing increase year on year is the sense of purpose and alignment to an organisation's values with your own personal beliefs. This includes having strong commitments to ED&I, sustainability and ESG practices, and be ready to share your organisation's commitments in these areas during the interview process with candidates, because more frequently you will be asked by the candidate for your feedback, and insights in regards to this. And then finally, for working professionals, adopting an innovative mindset through close communication and collaboration with peer networks would not only enhance innovation, but help to support your organisation's needs. As an employee, making sure you're having regular conversations with your manager to help them understand what skills you'll need to progress in your field beyond the next 3 to 5 years. In today's employment landscape, knowledge is no longer found only in classrooms or courses, so finding the right platforms or sources for knowledge is key. Obviously, your manager will be your best advisor, or certainly an important advisor, as they will have first-hand knowledge of the key skills that the organisation needs. And lastly, for many people, a purposeful career is a more rewarding career. To embed purpose in your work, firstly identify what really matters to you and how you would define purpose at work. Is it equal opportunity and resources for success? Having a good work-life balance, being well compensated. By making a connection between what you do and the bigger picture, you'll be able to fuel your sense of purpose in the workplace. So this sums up my sharing for today. I hope you have gained many useful insights. I will now pass you back to Patrick for the next part of our session.
Thank you, Kirsty, for the insightful sharing. I hope everyone had found what's being shared so far useful and also applicable to your workplace. If you have not downloaded a copy of our salary guide, worry not, as we would also provide a QR code at the end of the session. So moving on, we will now proceed to the final agenda for today, the panel discussion. do allow me to introduce all the lineup of speakers we have for today. I would like to welcome my colleague, Justin Thomas, who is the moderator for today's panel discussion. Justin is currently a business director at Hayes Singapore, with over 15 years of managing and recruiting within construction, property and engineering, and had recently taken up the ESG team. Moving on to our first panelist, Jeff Cheng. Jeff is the regional director for Asia in Flying Tiger Copenhagen, where he leads market expansion and acceleration within the region. He is an FMCG, CPG professional with over 20 years of experience under his belt, with a proven track record of developing and building global iconic brands like Dove, Clear, Vaseline, and also Häagen-Dazs. Our second panelist for today is Weber, who is the APAC CFO for TMF Group. He has 15 years of financial experience in multinational companies such as Deloitte, Suit Supply, and TMF Group. He has been the regional CFO since July 2022, covering 15 countries across Asia Pacific, and also a member of the Asia Pacific Exco in TMF Group, focusing on strategic plans for the region and also driving growth journeys for both organic and inorganic. Next up, we would have Sarah. Sarah is currently the Sales and Regional Market Expansion Executive with 18 years of experience within technology sales, partnerships, and digital development. She has worked for companies such as Airbus, Ericsson, Amdocs, and also Frost & Sullivan. Finally, we have Martin. Martin is an experienced energy and commodities banker who possesses experience with multiple super major trading houses. He has held several senior roles within the finance industry. So without any further ado, I'll pass it on to you, Justin.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for the introduction. I'd just like to say you're doing a great job keeping us on time today, so well done there. Good morning, everybody. Lots of great information, lots of great slides that Kirsty's presented earlier on, but we've managed to tease out a few key points this morning and a few key topics, such as the skills gap, a bit of upskilling, talent retention, and employee branding that we'll be focusing on in our panel discussion. And again, I'd like to welcome the panel and thank you very much for being here today. Weeby, if we could potentially start with yourself. In one of the earlier slides, or one of the first slides that Kirsty shared, it was interesting that 40% of organizations actually felt that their employees lacked some of the specialized skills that were necessary in their role. So I guess thinking about that, my question to you is, now that organizations have recognized this, how can we address this? How do organizations ensure that their employees, having recognized this, can get upskilled to take on the additional tasks and the output that we're asking them to do in this environment? And I guess beyond that as well, what happens if an organization doesn't do this once they've recognized it? What implications could it be for an organization down the track if it's not addressed?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And indeed, quite a big and significant number, to be honest, 40%. I think upscaling is definitely something which is not in particular new, right? It's something that we already address for many years, and I think it becomes more and more important if you look at digitalization. COVID has accelerated that, especially in Asia Pacific compared to Europe and EMEA, I would say, and Americas. It is a topic which is something where you need to put a lot of attention on, and not only in our company with 10,000 people, business basically, accounting, tax, HRP, GEM, but I think everybody in this call should address and should spend some time and money on it to have a great learning and development platform, to look into use your internal leaders, internal managers, basically to share insights which are quite useful for the younger generation. And that is something which, from a CFO perspective, even not that costly. And on the other hand, look at and have the conversation with your direct reports, with your teams, open sessions to look into what is for them quite important, because sometimes there's a big gap between what we think that is important versus what they find really important. And yeah, soft skill trainings, time management, presentation skills, but even the more hardcore in our business, for example, CPA Australia is something that we offer to people, which is quite frequently used. If you don't do it, if you basically do not put sufficient attention to it, yeah, then you will see attrition going up, because then next to the salary component, learning and development and career progression are going hand in hand, and your talents will move to another company who will offer that for sure.
Thanks, Weeby. I think you made a great point there, that size doesn't matter. Whether you're a large organization or whether you're a small organization, we all need to pay attention to this. And interestingly, I like your point around the conversation with the employees, because I think sometimes an employee can get caught in the day-to-day and perhaps not recognize themselves that they need some upskilling there as well. So I think you've made some great points there as well.
Absolutely. And I have a regional role, so I'm traveling a lot. But I was recently a month ago in Vietnam, basically, and then with the lower job bands, basically having that one-to-one conversation is great to have, because it gives you a lot of insight about what they find important. And then the next step is, of course, to make it actionable, because if you don't do it, then it's just, let's say, only listening. Yeah, and that's something that everybody can do in their own job, in their own role, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. I think, as they say, actions speak sometimes louder than words as well, Weeby, which is true. I guess sort of moving on from there, Jeff, if I could throw this question to yourself, and we saw that in the slides as well, and Kirsty spoke about it. You know, for the last 3 years, we've had practically many people in a full-time work from home capacity, and I guess like we are today, less of the face-to-face interactions. So my question to you, Jeff, is around, have we lost some of those crucial soft skills, or have our employees lost some of those crucial soft skills? Again, for example, maybe that interpersonal skill, simply by not being in a position to interact with people face to face. And if that's the case, and you potentially agree with that, what can we do as leaders and managers to bridge that gap and help them with this?
So thanks so much, first of all, for the invitation and participating in this wonderful panel. Such a privilege to be with such esteemed peers in the industry. So I think the question around this has to do with engagement and effectiveness. It's really interesting that the survey results show that it's still salary and benefits that are really your key drivers for leaving a role, leaving a job. But there's this old adage that, people join companies but leave bosses, right? And for me, I think it's still very, very true, but even more so during this heightened, new environment of virtual working, where you really need, as leaders, to over-communicate, over-engage. Now, I think to the question of soft skills, I think it was never lost. It was just shifted towards a different sort of way, whereas before it was all about face-to-face. And, everybody knows 70-80% of communication is nonverbal. So you had this sense of reading the room, reading the emotion, reading a lot of what's not being said. And we lost a lot of that when we had to shift to virtual Teams, virtual Zooms, virtual ways of working. And so I think as leaders and even as teams, there's now, with hybrid working, but also with continued virtual working, there's always a need to over-communicate. I've been in jobs where I've held regional and global responsibilities, practically a majority of my career. And I've always made it a point personally to be really over-communicating, because I think in a world where you cannot physically keep meeting with each other because of the geographies, time zones, and such, there is a need to be clear with how you communicate, be very, very simple, but also really try and drive engagement in many different ways. So for me, it's not just about business. It's not just about results. It's about people as human beings. So some of the things that, I really espouse and I really try to push is, you collaborate as as people, not as employees. So try to get to know people, what they've done or what they were up to in the weekend, what's bothering them, what's stressing them out, what's driving anxiety, or what's really things that you can celebrate together. Because ultimately, we all don't know what each person has at the back of his mind, what each person is really, the environment that each person is faced with. And so there's even a bigger responsibility as leaders to shift through the surface level, to go beyond business and really truly engage as people and as individuals with each of the team members, and especially with virtual working, which does not necessarily stop when we go back to the office and we physically interact with each other.
I like your point, Jeff, around taking the time to actually get to know one another. I think we have a tendency, especially in this world of virtual meetings, where we have a half an hour or an hour allocated, and we may not have that time where we did in the past, or we may have that inclination to actually build a bit of rapport and get to know people on a personal note as well. And interesting, I've only just seen the phrase "nice to meet you" over the last few years as well, which I don't think we would have been using that phrase maybe pre-pandemic or something like that. There's some great insights there, Jeff, across the board. Engagement, absolutely. Virtual, face-to-face, I think it's the absolute key there as well. Thank you for your insights there. I guess sort of following on from that a little bit around the engagement and the work from home, and I'll throw this one to you, Martin, as well. The slides spoke about, and Kirsty spoke about earlier around the remote and the flexible working arrangements, and I guess how over the last 3 years this is, to some companies, almost been mandatory. However, things have changed a little bit, and there's a shift back. But understandably, for some roles, say for example in the banking industry, you may need to be in the office full time. However, this is a question in the industry that we work in that we get asked, all the time by our candidates as well. So I guess, what looking at it, what's your take on this balance that we've got there, Martin? And I guess sort of even further than that, if we don't listen, or we don't speak to potential employees and our employees about this, will it have a sort of a retention? Will we have retention issues post this sort of coming out of the pandemic, especially for people that are used to maybe working from home 5 days a week?
Thank you, Justin, and again, thank you for the invite. Really appreciate it. I think it goes back to what Jeff also said, right? It's such a personal thing. You've got to look at it from all angles. So 2 examples from working from home versus not working from home. First and foremost, working from home outside of the pandemic was dreamt up by people that have extra rooms in the house, kids to bring to school, and that sort of stuff. That's not for everybody. So you have part of your team or part of the bank or part of your organization that actually don't want to work from home because they live in a shared house, they want to see friends at work, etc., etc. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the second thing is, for a lot of people, working from home is now the new normal. And as we know, changing from the normal to something else is quite a tough thing to do. So if you say to people, you're going to work in the office from now, some people would take that very negatively and say, okay, that's a reason for me to leave. And the opposite is also true. If you're going to say, I want everybody to work virtually, some people might not like it. So you need to find a way that works for everybody. And again, it then goes back a little bit to what Jeff said, right? People leave because of their boss. So if you make sure as a manager or boss, whatever you want to call it, that you take a personal interest in the well-being of your teammates, right? That's a big thing. So before the pandemic, when I was leading a team of 20 in London, we were supposed to work flexible because it was a cost-cutting thing, less square footage, if you will. We had a team of 20, and we went back to 14 desks. I figured out very quickly that around 7 people did not want to work from home. Just simple as that, didn't want to do it. So guess what? We made sure that they always had a desk. And there was no issue. We solved it as a team. We listened to people. We put it into action. We don't marry to rules. Maybe that's because I'm Dutch. I'm not entirely. It's not a guidance. You gotta work with the people around you to make sure that everybody is happy in what to do. And then one other observation I have, and that's maybe a bit controversial, I don't know. I do feel that the working from home strategy that some organizations have developed made sure that there is a blurring line between a private and a business individual. And I think that's a little bit dangerous, to be honest with you. I think there needs to be a far better closure, if you will. If once you walk out of the office, that's it, you can sort of switch off. But if you're working from home and your computer keeps on beeping, etc., are we generally, taking enough time off from work to be able to produce the results that we need to produce?
I guess on that point, Martin, as a leader, how do you allow your employees to have that disconnect at home? How do you allow them to have the permission at 5 or 5:30 or 6, whatever, to turn the computer off and when it's beeping?
Again, I don't want to. We're all grown-ups, well educated, right? So I don't want to tell people what to do, but I do listen. And what I also did at work was to sort of help people with what we called anxiety, but with their mental health, basically. And if I found out that some people were really struggling with that line, then I would say, why don't you work from the office a bit more, right? And I will make sure that at 6 o'clock, which is quite early in London time, they'll go home. And you show empathy, you show that you care, you show that you are really with them, right? And hopefully people do that to me as well, so that I have the same feelings. And I think that's, if you talk about retention, I think once you've got all that sort of relatively okay, nothing is perfect, then people will really find it hard to go because they're comfortable, they're okay, they are listened to. The fact that people listen to you is such a strong message.
I think that's echoing similar to Jeff was with his response, listening, engagement. That all these are all the things that employees crave. I guess from one Dutchman to another, Weeby, so we can get the full Dutch approach on this. What's your take on what we've been discussing now?
Very good. Yeah, it's great hearing, and I was a bit surprised because of, let's say, companies who are gonna move towards 100% at the office. So if you look, for example, at our Singapore office, there we have 3+2, so 3 days from the office and 2 days from home. We have a lot of young people, fresh graduates who really like that flexibility. But yeah, we are a bit conscious about, hey, what is the difference between people who are working from home, working at the office in terms of development? That's something that we are frequently monitoring via engagement surveys, via, let's say, discussions with the younger generation. But on the other hand, at this point, they really like it, and that's something that you need to adapt to in a certain way. But there are countries across my region, like, for example, Vietnam, where it's more or less impossible, where the younger generation needs to go to the office because of the lack of a proper workspace, do not have proper Wi-Fi. So there we need to ensure that from a real estate perspective, that we make sure that we have a good place to work. So it really differs per country. There's not something like a one size fits all. And I think that's something that we need to realize and frequently monitor from a talent development, from a retention perspective, and keep in touch with the people in that manner.
Yeah, I think the challenge that you spoke about with your Vietnam business was something that Martin spoke about very early on as well, Weeby, in terms of actually having the physical workplace for people at home to be able to be effective and actually perform their job as well, and giving them the tools, I guess.
And even the cultural aspect. So if they really like to engage, celebrate kind of festivals, that is in some of the countries in Asia Pacific more than in others. Yeah, that is something that you need to balance in and not to block, basically, because then you push a lot of the more personal touch out of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, you've been waiting there very patiently. Thank you. But I guess sort of moving onto the EDI, the equity, diversity, and inclusion side of things. And there was an interesting stat that we saw there earlier that from 2022 to 2023, there's been a 3% increase, or from 19 to 22% of people saying that or employees saying that actually stay in a company due to their diversity and inclusion that they have there. And I know we were speaking earlier on this week, within your organisation, you have a massive workforce, number one, but also you have quite a diverse workforce in terms of the gender, where people everything across the board. So I guess my question to you is, could you share any sort of examples about sort of EDI policies in action that you've got in your current role or previous roles, and sort of what sort of influence does it have on the way you sort of work with your team?
Yeah, thanks, Justin, and everyone else for the feedback earlier. So I think having an EDI policy is extremely important because more and more we see local talents rising up to the bar, right? Rising up to the challenge I would like to lead, as well as we see female talents. So internally, there are a lot of programs, such as mentoring sessions, right? We select mentors for talents, whether they are female or local talents, to allow them to have a more visibility to what is required within an organization in order to help them rise above the ranks, right? Because every organization have its own corporate identity. And in that identity, there are things such as a network, right? Networking that they will probably need to embark on. And based on this corporate identity, then there are also networking sessions that are then developed, right? Communities that are being set up, right? To create more visibility, to have a platform for talents, diverse talents, to be able to have a voice, to present themselves and exchange what they are doing, right? Because traditionally, if you look at our region, right? I'm looking here a little bit more Asian, we are a little bit more conservative culture. You don't see many females or many local talents that would, come, let me give you my perspective, let me give you my views, please hear me out. We are usually a more conservative culture, right? We like to listen first, think a little bit before, and we try to find an opportunity to speak up. Which is very, very different for a corporate culture. For example, if you're a European company, right, then people tend to be more outspoken. And sometimes, even for a very outspoken person, you will still think, at what point do I get to speak? Because, everybody else just takes a stab at it. And so to create a platform to allow diverse talents to be able to speak up, engage with executives, what we have I've seen corporates put in place, including the company that I'm working for now as well. And also we see, the mentoring programs that I have mentioned, really these are one-to-one attention to kind of give them the unspoken rule within the company, to share with them the unspoken success stories, of what needs to be done for leaders, what works, how does a leader look like within an organization, what is it that we can do to ensure that, you're on the right path. How do you build your network? So there are all these soft skills which you can't find in the employee handbook, which you can't find in your talent roadmap, and it's really something that they can only learn through this mentoring program. But I think having this program is one thing to address and to promote really EDI within a corporate. But I think sometimes there remains existing challenges across whether you're a female talent or diversity, gender diversity, or a nationality diversity. There are things, for example, core things like competence. For example, some of the talents that we see may not be at the right competence level, not because they're not good, but because we are in a change of an industry. For example, when COVID hit and we were moving towards a digitalized business, you can see that suddenly there was a huge demand for digitalized talents. But what we don't see is digital talents that were good or already had background in aerospace technologies, right? So then there was a bit of a ramp up, right? You can either have an aerospace talent but not digital, or a digital talent but not aerospace. And so it takes time to build. So the cross-pollination takes time to build the diverse profile that we need. And sometimes the fit for role. Some roles were not so fitted perhaps for local employees at the moment, because just due to the knowledge and upskilling, right, there still needs to be some ramp up journey. So we are on an upward trend and it takes time. And some roles are also very demanding, right? It will require you to work beyond the office hours, right? Especially taking night calls, especially when you're working for an MNCs, night calls late into the night. And I think for some female talents, it could pose a challenge, especially when you have children, in our culture, especially, or in a more Asia, Pan-Asia kind of culture. So I think sometimes, as much as a corporate would like and continue to promote, they also need to be understanding of the cultural challenges that females may face. And I think it is more prevalent in our region, right? Because I do have a sense, based on my experience, that generally we are more pro paternity leave, right? We have longer paternity leave in EU policies than we do here in Asia, for example. So because of this, it kind of indirectly restricts the female, even, and we can see corporates, right, pushing more, giving more paternity leave, even beyond the government regulation. But not all companies, a lot of companies are still following the government regulations, which we still see a steep difference. And therefore, I see these are still some stumbling blocks which needs to be cleared before we can really say that, okay, we are moving towards a very neutral EDI policy. And having said that, I do notice that employees definitely appreciate, a place where there is an opportunity for local female talents to rise to the bar. And you can see this a lot from Glassdoor feedbacks, right? One of the key feedbacks for MNCs is really around glass ceiling that they face, in the corporate, and how do you break that barrier? And I think it's a lot about breaking first our own local cultural barrier, and then reaching out, to reach higher than the glass ceiling. So I think this is a little bit about the corporate view, as well as myself as a personal view.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think that transcends many different countries and many different cultures, some of the challenges that you were speaking about then. And as the ex-Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, once famously said, the largest underutilised demographic of talent in the workforce is actually women. And it was interesting to see the stats from Kirsty earlier on, that I guess employees are recognising that there's a lack of female talent in not only in management, but in some companies actually in the whole workforce in general. So there's some great insights there. Thank you very much. I'd like to move on now to the sustainability and the ESG side of things as well. And I guess when I sort of started working for Hays many years ago, and in the industry, it wasn't really a word that was used so much. And I guess we keep hearing it everywhere now, whether it be in private sector or in the public sector. So, obviously there is a focus on it. And if I can throw to you, Martin, we were talking earlier on in the week when we were getting to know one another a little bit. And, interestingly, you were talking about some oil and gas companies that you've either worked for or had affiliations with in the past. And traditionally, we might not see these as companies that would be, I guess, leaders in this sort of space as well, due to the nature of the business. But, you were very passionate, and you spoke about ESG issues and how seriously these sort of large oil and gas companies have taken it for a long time as well, not just in the recent times when it's been so prevalent as well. So I guess what I'd like to hear, if I may, as well, if you've got some examples from maybe early on of some implementation and how you've seen these big companies adopting some of these, or being early adopters with some of these sort of ESG strategies. And what's your sort of long term as to how we're going to go down that track?
Well, let's start with the long term, Justin, because I think we need to be a bit more realistic about the energy transition, even though I am passionate about it and I want to see it work. But it's not going to be easy. Then a lot of things need to be adjusted or changed before we get there. So just out of just a few numbers, currently as of today, oil demand is around 102 million barrels a day. That is not insignificant. Going forward, in the next year, it's going to be 104. So despite everything, we've still seen an increase in demand in oil and gas. But the simple fact is, because of perception, there's not enough investment in the oil and gas industry. So we have not enough investment in the oil and gas industry, but arguably on the flip side, we also do not have enough invested in the alternative energy space. So therefore, we see an energy price crisis. And people say it's Ukraine, but believe me, this was already happening well before Ukraine. Right? It's a lazy argument to say, this is all based on Ukraine. It's just simply not true. So we have a complete mismatch of investment strategies. Now, what the big oil companies have done and are still doing, to come back to your first part of the call, they need a social license to operate, right? Because rightly or wrongly, they are perceived as the main polluters in this world, right? Not us who are taking planes and driving cars, but the oil company. So what they've been doing for many, many years is invest in wind farms, invest in carbon capture, invest in solar panels, invest in battery technology, invest in carbon markets, even though governments didn't want to really support it. And they've been doing this for many, many years. BP under Lord Brown was beyond petroleum, right? That was their slogan. We're talking 15 years ago. And the reason why I think, personally, as a natural resources banker, why I think this is important, because for me, that gives a great opportunity. Because I think these guys, for 4 reasons, have the power to drive the energy transition. First and foremost, they have the people. Secondly, they have the knowledge and capabilities of doing large-scale, very complex projects. What it is, like a huge wind farm with 200, 300 pylons is a huge project. Thirdly, they have the financial firepower to do that. I was just reading up a little bit on the Q1 numbers. We're talking, these companies are doing what, 500 billion free cash flow? I mean, there's not a lot of companies out there who can do that, right? And then fourth reason, and it's not unimportant, they have to. If they want to have a role going forward, they will have to be seen as at the forefront of the energy transition. So that's why I think these guys are doing what they're doing and will do it more. The flip side, again, of all this is that not a single energy transition technology has proven economically valuable, right? So if you're Shell or Total or Petronas, you cannot justify just investing in alternative energy because you're not going to be able to pay the dividends that you're paying today. And that's also an issue, right? Economic reality drives a lot as well. So that's my point. Back to the future, I think what I'm hoping that we find another way of transportation, right? We've been doing things with, propulsion and wheels for a long time now. Maybe we can find another way of getting around.
Probably Elon Musk might be there, Martin, for us, our savior.
Like that. Or these hyperloops or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But we've been using round things to go forward for a long time now.
You make an interesting point around the commerce versus the social aspect as well. And I believe that organizations now are actually seeing the commercial benefit, and you're talking on a different scale with these oil and gas companies, but even your more corporate sustainability, there are sponsors from C-suite individuals to see the commercial outcomes that can come about from some of these initiatives that are in place as well.
But we got to see sustainability also in the ESG factor, right? And I think it's a little bit strange that by taking investment out of the oil and gas industry, we are actually increasing energy poverty. Is that the right way of going about things? I'm not entirely sure, and I think we need to have a bit more of an open discussion about these type of things as well.
Yeah, agreed. Jeff, what's your take from a different industry and a different opinion and different challenges, I guess, as well?
So I'm really personally passionate about this area, this specific topic. I got into it with my roles when I was working in Unilever. I think Unilever was one of the pioneers in this space. I like what Martin said around, it's very easy to blame someone else. It's very easy for us to say it's somebody else's responsibility, right? It's a government, it's oil and gas. But I think collectively, there first has to be a realization that it's everybody's problem because we live in the same planet and there's no alternative to that. And I think that realization is really important in a sense of working together and working for that common purpose. Now, it's great to see a lot more companies and industries nowadays look at ESG not as a CSR, but as part of their way of doing business and part of their purpose. And I think that's the right way to go. I think critical is senior leadership commitment and endorsement that this is part of the business model. And second is really about this mindset that it's not a choice. It's not business or sustainability ESG. It is end. And I think that's the critical part. And I still see a lot of companies or industries look at it as an or. Oh, we're not going to make money if we're going to use alternative this and alternative that, renewable this and renewable that. But I think the shift has to be, we will make money and have responsible sourcing and take care of water and not pollute the environment and make sure carbon emissions are at neutral or even less than that. So I think it I've been attracted to a lot of companies for many reasons, but ESG is one of the great things that also makes me want to help the company, join the company, lead the teams in the company, because it gives you a really noble and collective purpose to make a difference in humanity and in this world that we live in. Because ultimately, I want to make sure that I leave this world better for my kids and my kids' kids. And it's that mindset that we need to all adopt. And we need to push leaders in the organization, and we need to push governments, obviously, and all of that. But what can we do as individuals, leaders, people in the organization to really make and embed it as part of the business model, and not just an or not just sort of a CSR thing? Because once we do that, and once everybody in the organization aligns to that, then you start seeing really drastic and significant change that really makes a difference.
Sorry, I agree with you as well, Jeff. I think there's a realization now that now is the time. Now we're at a critical time to actually leave the planet better for our children and our grandchildren moving forward. So I can see the passion coming through from yourself there as well, Jeff, and I do appreciate that. Just over to yourself, Sarah. You're in an industry that produces a little bit of carbon to sometimes as well. And I think we're talking about that before, and the organisations that you work for as well, similar to Martin as well, and hopefully not an alternative form of transport for yourself. But from what Martin, we're talking about as well, you've worked for organisations that are constantly innovating and looking for better ways to, I guess, sort of to work commercially, but with a focus on ESG. Could you give a little insight into that for us, please?
Yeah, when Martin said, replace it, I was like, no, indeed, we recognize that the aerospace or the aviation sector has been one of the largest emitters, but we do recognize that is something that we want to change, and that's why in 2020 the company that I work for now, Airbus, has decided to change our company purpose, right, and update it to say that, okay, sustainability is not a strategy, but sustainability is the way we live, right? We're saying that we are going to pioneer sustainable aerospace for a safe and united world. And I think in that essence, one of the key things was really to start looking at what is it that we can do as an organization. I think previously there are talks of okay, let's do something in sustainability. It was like a project, it was like an action. But by having it as a purpose, right? So you live, breathe, and work in sustainability. So in everything that we do, whether we are working with suppliers, whether we are looking at our own products, or whether when we are working with our customers and our services, we always ensure that sustainability comes first. Like any reductions in carbon emissions will be one of the key drivers. And this also calls for the investments that we are putting in, right? So for example, new aircraft technologies that would be needed to reduce emissions in terms of our products. So having a change in products, using alternative fuel that will reduce less fuel burn and reduce carbon emissions. So that's something else that we are looking to do as well. But however, some of this reduction through fuel replacement, reduce new aircraft generations, reducing our scope 1 as well, our own consumption. So in terms of plastics or, paper, how do we contribute to those as well? And our scope 2, right, our source of energy. So we really look at it from a broad spectrum. Now, but what is also interesting is that for me, that I had, as an employee of Airbus, where I had felt that, okay, you know, I think this is something that Airbus has gone above and beyond, was looking into the scope 3, which means that the emissions of our products. You know, and also because it was one of our largest contribution to our emissions is actually in the scope 3, and it's making a lot of efforts, right, to try to advocate, right, with countries, with our customers, trying to promote the theme of sustainability as well, right? It is our top company objective, right? In everything that we do, you know, it is with the objective of carbon reductions, with the objective of net zero by 2050. So for sure, you can see that it is not just an effort of one person, but it touches every nook and cranny of what we are doing, right? Every business, every employee, every services, every aircraft that we have is to help reduce carbon emissions or towards net zero by 2050. And sometimes we also look at market-based measures, right? For example, direct carbon capture, right, to kind of make up for some of those which we cannot immediately reduce. So there are different technology that we are being looked into in terms of innovating. So we are innovating with the customers, we are innovating our own processes, we are innovating our products. So you can see the whole transformation is rolling out. You know, it's like you give a vaccination and then you can see the whole system, you know, is reacting to it. So I must say that as an employee, it's been very motivating, and that people are really excited, right, to be working in a company that priorities sustainability and ESG, and that is taking it very, very seriously. So yeah, so I think it's a key employee motivator, and we are also hoping that with this we are able to attract young and new talents that see this as a big value proposition, and to inspire them to work in this sector, right? And not like what Martin said, let's go work for the new Hyperloop, let's go work for the new SpaceX, right? But to really give a new twist to an existing company, or a company with a lot more years of history.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I love the point that you made there, and I think whether we're a company or an individual, with the ESG or the sustainability side of things, let's just make a start. Let's just do something. Every little action that all of us can do, will have a massive combined effect as to how we leave things for the next generation, as you said as well, Jeff. But look, I'm sure you're equally as passionate about ESG as everybody else. But I just want to throw to you for one final question, if I may, before we finish up. And I think there's been a bit of talk about skill shortage and low employment rates, and I guess over the past 3 years we've seen when employees have been changing jobs, it's not uncommon for people to be receiving a 20, 25, sometimes even 30% salary increase. It was almost considered normal. So I guess sort of with a large and diverse workforce for yourself, and you did say before you transcend many different countries. What are you seeing in the market? Has there been a revision? Are the expectations still there from employees, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you. So I think what is good to realize is that there is a short after COVID effect that was already in the media, and is even interrelated to the higher inflation. And in EMEA, that's approximately 10%, for example, if you look at the Netherlands. But if you look at Asia Pacific, then it's luckily a bit lower. The dependency on energy, on oil, gas, on food is, let's say, less to other countries than that it is in EMEA. So that helps basically driving down. Plus what we see, yes, the ask for 20-30% is something which we see happening in the last 2-3 years as well. However, we see definitely a slowdown. Attrition goes down, not only in Singapore, but even across Asia Pacific and across the globe, which is, I think, a good trend. So the war on talent is still there. There is low unemployment, but people are, let's say, less switching jobs, which is good. And I think we have over 300 people in this school. I think there is a big job to be done by ourselves to make sure that it becomes a bit more manageable, and that you basically give your people more a career than a job, and that you make sure that you have that conversation about making sure that you are a bit patient, not leaving after 1.5, 2 years for 10, 20% higher salary your organization, but make sure that you really have contributed something after 5, 7, 10 years. And then your own proposition, your own career development will eventually help you in switching to another job with a better purpose and eventually a better salary. So I think it's on us to with HR leaders in this school as well to share that message, not only during recruitment stage. If I have an interview, then I'm always asking, are you looking for a job or a career? But even along the way during that career development program, what you should have with your talents.
Yeah, thank you, Evie. I agree with you as well. The job versus career, and I guess sort of that ties in nicely. Just to summarize and bring everything back to maybe the start of the panel discussion where we were talking about engaging with employees, listening to our employees, as decision makers and managers as well. Not everything's a one size fits all, whether it be the work from home or whether it be the not work from home. It's all about speaking to the people who are in the workforce and finding out what's best for them. And then we'll have longevity. And like you said, the rewards come, off the back of that, whether it be career progression or monetary as well. I would just like to finish with one quote, and following on from that, we were all very, very passionate about sustainability. But I think sort of, Sarah, you probably summed it up best, and probably a bit of a mantra that I'm probably going to live by now. Let's just make sustainability the way that we live. And on that note, I'd like to pass it back to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Justin. That was a very interesting discussion from our panel speakers. A lot of experience and thoughts being shared. I guess it's clear that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach if there's a key takeaway for today's discussion. With that, we have now come to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank all our speakers, Kirsty, Justin, Sarah, Jeff, Martin, and Weber, for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you all, our audience present here today, as well as all our consultants at Hays for helping in making this event a successful one. I hope it has been insightful, 1.5 hours of your time. If you would like a copy of the 2023 Hays Asia Salary Guide, you may download the soft copy of the guide using the QR code on the screen right now. Once again, thank you everyone, and have a wonderful day ahead.